Okay, here we are at the Jackson County Commission. This is Gary Morgan with In the Borough, and I'm sitting here with Chairman of the Jackson County Commission, Matthew Hodges. And I've asked for this interview with him, and Mr. Hodges has been gracious to grant the interview, and we're going to talk about a few things today. The main thing is so-called Plan B. Now, what do I mean by Plan B? And that is what happens to Jackson County if the 1% sales tax does not pass. If the citizens vote no on the 1% sales tax. I don't think, and one of the reasons I want to do this interview, it is my impression that citizens are not totally grasping, and some politicians here in the county are not totally grasping the seriousness of the situation with the county budget. I've went over with Mr. Hodges on the county budget. I've looked at records going back several years. I've looked at records from the legislative delegation and discretionary fund, and I've highlighted some stuff, and I've had discussions with Mr. Hodges, and we thought it'd be a good idea to explain downhearted, real honest discussion about what's going on. And I've asked for this. Matthew Hodges has not asked for this, and please don't blame him as threatening the citizens. There is no threat here, man. I'm telling y'all, this is reality. This is the real world. This is what's going to happen. So Matthew, at that point, let's talk about where we're at and with the 1% sales tax. I heard you talk about it last night at the City Council. Good presentation. I think the mayor racked you over the coals. I think he said some things that were totally inappropriate, and I'm not sure if he understands totally, and that's why I say, and I think there's other politicians that may not understand the full scope of how this will have an effect on Jackson County if your budget doesn't come together, if the money is not there to meet the needs, because there's a lot of things that Jackson County pays for is very obvious in the budget, external from the courthouse itself, that people depend on. So you take it away, sir.
Well, again, what you're asking for and what you would like to know, as I understand it, is kind of what happens if we make the cuts. If this tax doesn't pass, where do we go from there? And I think the biggest thing about that, and like you say, I don't know if a lot of folks do understand, there is no status quo. That's kind of the bottom line of this whole picture. We can't maintain what we have because we have a deficit budget. We have more revenue or more expenses than we have revenue coming in every year.
Now, can I interrupt you, Mike?
Yes, yeah.
What is the revenue incoming?
The incoming revenue is just over $7 million.
And what is the expenses?
About $7.4 million. That's on our general fund. That's just
right
on our general fund.
Okay.
Our solid waste and public works operate right within the black zone. Slightly red, slightly green. We kind of kept those right in the black zone, though.
Good. Thank you.
So regarding the general fund is where the biggest problem is, and that's where the $350,000 deficit, which is that difference between our revenues and our expenses is. We've talked about cutting that budget. We've worked very hard over the past 2.5 years to get the budget to where it's at, to that deficit. We started out with something well over $1.2 million, in estimates probably even $1.5, $1.6 million actual deficit with the county. So we've trimmed that back over the years to where we passed this last budget of $350,000 and made a lot of cuts. The problem is that at this point we feel like we've made all the cuts that we can make without having to hurt services even more or really show that services are hurting. So what's going to happen if this tax doesn't pass? One thing that we want to use this tax for is to pave roads. We put $0 into local road paving this year. So that means we are not going to see any roads paved, new roads paved from dollars we put into this year, probably not even next year, because we don't have the money to do it. So not having our roads paved, that means when they get to a certain point, there's going to be only one option, and that's turning those roads back to dirt, so that we maintain them better graded than we can pave.
Let's talk. Let me interrupt you again, if I may.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Last night in the City Council meeting, they talked about an issue, A-Trip funds.
Right.
That where Stewart and Porter Road had received money, part being put in by the city, part being put in by the federal government through the state in a grant program. And they said it was approximately 1.7 miles, and there was $4.4 million involved in that. Now, that would be their cost per mile of what would 4.4? So half of that would be 2.2. So about $2 million would be the cost of a mile of road. You had told me before that your cost is a little less on that. What is the county's cost a mile per road approximately?
I didn't catch the numbers from the city. Our cost per mile is roughly about $130,000, $140,000 per mile for an asphalt pavement. That's what all our federal jobs, we do an asphalt job on those, and that's about $130,000 to $140,000 a mile. So we do pay 4 miles a year off those federal dollars, but that's limited to what roads we can use that on. And again, 4 miles from 1,100 miles is going to take, nearly 300 years if that's the only thing we were using.
How many miles of road are in Jackson County?
1,100 miles.
1,100. That's a lot of road.
It's a whole.
Of course, Jackson County, what's the 4th largest county in the state of Alabama?
Right.
Huge land area in Jackson County. A lot of rural roads.
Right.
And some that in bad need of repair, and bridges in bad need of repair.
Right.
Well, thanks for that on the road. What else?
Another big part, one of the things we want to use these tax dollars for is the fire departments. There's been a shift in the millage rate and how that affects a lot of fire departments. Several fire departments throughout Jackson County have lost funds because of that. And my understanding is that 3 are at high risk of closure due to financial issues, and this has really added to that. So what we wanted to do is bring those dollars back to the fire departments and have some extra dollars to support our fire departments. Again, these are folks that are volunteer and put their lives on the line in a lot of cases. But we want to put dollars back into that. So again, not having the resources to do that, we see the threat of some fire departments closing throughout Jackson County. And when that happens, we see obviously insurance rates go up. We see the need to expand our services. I've used the example of Macedonia a lot. If Macedonia were one of the ones to close, Section and Langston then would have to pick up that coverage area. So now those communities are sending their resources even further to maintain, their fire district. So it really does affect everybody as far as the fire department goes. So not having these funds again has a negative effect on those fire departments.
And we're talking about individuals. Individual families be affected. Their fire rates would actually go up, am I right?
Yeah, if the ISO rating goes up, that means your insurance rate will go up in a lot of cases. So yeah, we've heard stories of folks when they've changed, their district has changed or whatever, that their insurance rates have nearly doubled. So it could have a profound effect if you lose that fire department in your area on your insurance rates. Not to mention, again, if you live in Section or Langston and Macedonia does close, or a community around you closes, now your department's having to pick up that coverage area for the time being, hopefully you can reorganize at some point, but you're covering that area and you're sending your resources outside of your home community to take care of a situation, fire or wrecks or whatever the cases may be.
Emergency first responders are crucial in the community.
Right.
They are the folks that respond to wrecks, respond to fires, respond to rescues. So how about the rescue squad?
One of the big things, we talked about the other items we'd have to cut. There are really 2 other places we'd have to cut, which would be our appropriations, and then we get down to the people. And we talk about, closing the courthouse once a week or things like that, and I can get more on that in a minute. But in regards to our appropriations, things like the rescue squad, the libraries, we still do some appropriation, even though it's now a county department. We've considered an appropriation to senior services and a lot of the programs that happen there, whether it be the transportation services, as mentioned, the food programs, a lot of things like that that are supported by Jackson County Dollars Boys and Girls Club. There's a whole slew of items and opportunities or things that we support through that we would cut first before we even got into the aspect of cutting further into the budget.
So you got to cover, as I understand, you got to cover your general operations here in the county, the courthouse. You have to cover all these things, the employee salaries, which comes out of the general fund, emergency management, even the sheriff's department. All that money goes into the big pot, and all that has to be covered. So that's public safety and emergencies.
Yeah, we've got that's the core business in a sense we have to maintain. Right.
So you mentioned, I heard you say something about the transportation.
Right.
And senior citizens. How about Meals on Wheels?
The Meals on Wheels program, or the Meals program that happens through the senior services, our Council on Aging, that could definitely be affected again, depending on how many funds we have to cut from that to balance our budget. Really, the transportation is one of the biggest ones. For every dollar that we take away from that, we're basically taking away $2 because it's subsidized by the federal government. So you know, that's a really big one that will take a hit of dollars.
And poor people depend on this. I know I've seen poor folks ride that, and I live in a depressed area where I live here in town, and the transportation services comes out there because not everybody has vehicles.
A lot of
or
folks
can drive.
That's the bottom.
Not
line.
able to drive.
Right. A lot of folks aren't able to get out or don't have a vehicle to get out, and that's where that transportation. I'm amazed by how necessary that transportation service is in Jackson County. But it's a great program, and it's something obviously we want to maintain. But it really is a good program. That you know covers all of Jackson County, even throughout Scottsboro. I think Scottsboro participates with one bus and a driver. But you know, again, from bringing folks throughout Jackson County into the different communities through Scottsboro, Stevenson, Bridgeport to do the business they've got to do.
Well, let's thank you, Mr. Hodge. Health Department. Now, you know, I can remember very distinctly some discussions. Mr. Cotton, when he was employed, when he was there before his retirement, and Ms. Cisco, her coming up here, and I think maybe even the state health officer's been up here, or the area health officer's been up here to discuss. They need help. There's been state budget cuts, and the health department's cut. And if I remember right, I think this county, the commission funds an environmentalist. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. Since we've been in office, I'm not sure how long it had gone before there. I know I think there was about a $40,000 appropriation from the county. I know that first year we had put that. The second year it increased tremendously, and last year we went ahead and cut that back because again we're trying to keep the budget as trim as possible. So we did cut that back again last year. But it's my understanding that if that funding gets cut from the county totally, we would lose one of those environmentalists within Jackson County. So, you know, again, that's why we've seen it as important to maintain that. That they do help with some of the solid waste fees and collections, but definitely not to the amount I think that we appropriate.
And this is important because the environmentalist, I mean, that's a kind of a fancy word, but it's important. That includes food inspection at restaurants. That includes health inspections at pools at summertime. Of course, summer, I mean, we all don't need a pool, but we do need our restaurants to be inspected. We do need, when a builder builds a facility or a home in the county and there's no sewage service, the septic tank has to be inspected. So this could possibly have a very detrimental effect and a very negative effect on expansion.
Right.
Without the necessary environmental coverage, without the necessary health inspection. In fact, in health is a horrible way to go.
Right. We feel so. That's why we've been, you know, continue to provide funds towards that resource because we feel like it's a necessary resource. But again, we have to worry about our core operation, and that's where if you know, again, that'd be something that would be cut because that's not part of the core operation.
Well, I'm trying to highlight these things. Senior prescriptions.
Senior RX, that's a program. Again, the funding on that's been very interesting. It is a county department. We've taken that, made, you know, worked very well together with them. They have a great program there, but again, we've got 2 people out there handling that process. They do a great job at helping seniors take care of their prescriptions and get those low cost or no cost drugs to folks. That's a hugely important program, but again, that will have to definitely see cuts also because right now, with the way that's budgeted, we've had to supplement that to an extent for this year, and we, you know, again, see what happens down the road.
Library services.
We've cut libraries tremendously since we've been in office. You know, and I visited with the Scottsboro Library one day to find out what programs they've got going on. It really is a huge benefit to our community, the services that they provide. Not just from having, you know, the basic services, but the programs that the libraries conduct for children, for adults, all the things that they've got going on. I think that's incredibly important. And, you know, I hate that, but again, we have already cut them tremendously. The few dollars that are left in that, you know, it's another that's part of the appropriation.
Right. And the library programs are important for school children. I know here in Scottsboro and in other areas in the community, the other municipalities, school children depend on that library.
Right.
So to diminish that resource in the community, I mean, it's got to be supported. It takes a staff in there to maintain the facilities. And of course, I know they get other dollars, but it's important to point out they get their dollars are also from county revenue.
Right. I know that they've had to try to get, a lot of donated dollars to do stuff, and I think they have a hard time sometimes getting those donated dollars. But again, being able to supplement that and help them do those programs is obviously important.
Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, small appropriation to the Boys and Girls Club, but again, that is an incredibly important program for Jackson County, really Scottsboro and Jackson County. What the folks benefit from that. We've been involved from that since the time I was on the city council, but I'm very proud of that program.
I've noticed Sheriff Phillips, good people, Chief Deputy Rocky Harning. He's been at every meeting that's been in the communities,
right?
Where you've explained the 1%, the need for the 1% sales tax. They've been there. They're concerned about it. They were at Scottsboro. Rocky was at Scottsboro last night. And will the Sheriff's Department, will they be affected if this?
Beyond all the appropriations, every department will be affected probably in some way. You get down to probably our smallest department with the EMA. There may be some small changes there, but overall, after we've cut appropriations, after we've closed the courthouse once a week, then we have to get down to cutting people or cutting the remaining dollars from every department left that exists. Now the Sheriff's Department and the jail, those are two huge expenses. Folks don't realize how expensive it is to operate that jail, but we can't get away with not cutting those because we can't afford to cut just the probate or just revenue to make up those dollars. So yes, the Sheriff's Department, the jail, both of those would be affected through this process as well. Again, that's if the dollars aren't there to, come up with a solution.
I'm going to ask you something. Do you think the people are understanding? I've heard you try to explain it. I mean, this is, to me, looking at all the issues, looking at the papers, looking at the figures, the different documents, and having knowledge. I've been attending these things for a long time now, more than you've been here. But you're into the gist of it, I mean, you're into the nitty gritty, making things work. And are you thinking the folks are fully understanding what this means, why the 1% is needed, and fully what's going to happen? You think John and Jane Doe that live in the valley, up on the mountain, or down in town, whether they be the influential citizen or the poor citizen, do you think they're, or the politicians?
I think, through the community meetings, those folks that are taking the time to understand, the folks that are either reading or coming to the meetings or watching the videos, I think a majority of those folks, a good 70, 80, 90% of those folks understand much better when they leave those meetings or after they've read those articles or after they've watched those videos. I think they understand much better what the problem is. It's like, what we're talking about here, we're talking about the cuts. I hate to talk about the cuts. I know it comes across as a threat a lot of times, but that's kind of the bottom line. We have two ways that we can go. We can go forward and we can fund these things, or we can go backwards and not fund these things. There is no maintaining what we have. And I do think that a lot of folks, once they've taken the time, understand that. I feel good about the response that we've gotten overall from the communities, from the different meetings that we've had. We'll continue to have meetings. We've got more meetings to come, so we'll continue to have meetings with folks and continue to get out there and talk to folks individually and at these things. And that's all that we can do. But again, I think we've gotten a very positive response, and most folks are understanding once they go through the process. I think most of them are understanding the needs and where we're headed.
I'm looking at my list here. Another area that would probably have to be cut, 4-H clubs.
Yeah, the 4-H program has done something, that's through the Extension Service. We fund, that's our contribution to the Extension Service. Obviously, we have that building, the building the Extension office is in is our building. But as a direct financial, other than the building and any utilities we supply, we actually give dollars for that 4-H program. That's how the 4-H program is funded, through the dollars that the county gives. That's what I understand based on how they do their budget. So if we cut that, will they find another way to fund it? That'd be for them. But again, that's one of the appropriations that we have out there, and that would be something that we would have to consider as far as cuts go.
Okay. A lot of your there's been some problems with the TVA in lieu of tax.
Right.
And discretionary fund. Of course, the discretionary fund is up in the air right now, and,
right.
and a lot of these programs we've talked about in here receives money from that.
That's right.
And so this is a horrible time.
Oh, yeah.
Right now. I mean, it's like a confluence of bad things that are kind of coming together here all at once, and politically that's not a good place to be.
No. we've had that going on since I think we've seen more and more problems, as we've kind of dug into the situation. And like you're right, right now those dollars are kind of being held on to until a law is changed or whatever. So a lot of these groups are not seeing their dollars from in lieu of tax. Plus there's that threat of cut appropriation. So absolutely, these organizations, and I've talked with several leaders of these organizations, they're very, very concerned, obviously, about what's going to happen.
I've got in my sheet here that items for discussion. I've got a big circle around it. It says something for nothing.
Right.
Services cost money.
Right.
The state of Alabama, and I've heard mentions of this before from people. The mayor mentioned it last night. Mayor Potter of the city of Scottsboro. Well, his suggestion, let's increase property taxes. But what do you think about that suggestion, an increase in property taxes versus raising a 1% sales tax?
I think there's two things. With the property tax, one, I've said we would have to more than double our portion of property tax. The county's portion of property tax would more than double it to get the same amount we expect for this sales tax. That's a huge increase, one. Secondly, if we're talking about business development, now industries, we abate most industrial taxes, so it may not affect that. But when we talk about commercial development, they're still paying, in most cases, they're paying their property tax. So we're increasing property tax on those businesses, the same ones that we're saying we're working so hard to get into Jackson County. So I think that's a negative there. Another part, we talk about hurting the low-income folks. I think with the property tax, you can end up hurting the low-income the most, because if I own property and I'm renting it to somebody, I have an option now to pass that property tax on down to the renter, and I think that's what, could very well happen in a lot of cases. A sales tax, on the other hand, yes, it affects everybody in Jackson County, but it only affects based on what you spend, plus we benefit from all those folks that come into Jackson County. Right now, we're not getting all those dollars from the fishermen and cavers and campers and everybody else that's coming and spending money at Walmarts and Dollar Generals and all those other things. We get a little gas tax from them, but other than that, we're not getting, those resources that they're bringing to Jackson County. So I see that a property tax definitely does not solve the problem. It doesn't grow like a sales tax does, and a sales tax, again, though it does affect the citizens of Jackson County, now we can allow for folks that are not citizens of Jackson County, all those folks that come to visit Jackson County, to participate in it. Another thing a lot of folks don't understand, the state owns tens of thousands of acres in Jackson County for a lot of the wildlife land and things like that. They don't pay taxes on those. As they purchase more of that, again, that's more tax dollars that we're losing as far as property tax goes. TVA doesn't pay, for the property that they have, kind of a similar amount of property taxes. So, property taxes for the type of county we are just is not the solution. So much of it belongs to the state, so much of it belongs to TVA, and it would really put a bigger burden, I think, on our citizens than doing the sales tax.
Well, what do you think about the notion that folks that live near the county line, well, they're just not going to buy here, they're going to go 15 or 20 miles, and actually when that 15 miles or 7 miles is added up, you're talking about 14, 40 miles, it's a large trip, of course, guesstimate. What do you think about that notion? Do some folks say, well, it's going to decrease the revenue altogether?
I think a lot of folks already do that. I don't see that we'll have that decrease in revenue. I think that, again, if we reinvest in this community, we're just going to see more dollars come back to Jackson County. The reason a lot of folks go right now is not necessarily because we're 9 cents, because Marshall County's 9 cents, Madison County's 9 cents. Folks go to these places because there's something they want. Folks go to Marshall or Madison County because there's a Publix there. That's why they go to shop to that area. If we can, again, invest and bring those businesses to Jackson County, are you going to choose to go 5 minutes up the road or 30 minutes up the road to get your groceries? If your option's 5 minutes away, most people are going to choose that 5-minute option. So I don't see that tax rate will affect that. And another portion of that, I know that it's also been pointed out about who else around us has a 10% tax rate. Most of the TVA in lieu of region does not have a 10% tax rate. as we see this TV in lieu of tax drop down, they're going to have to come up with a solution. We're not the only ones in this boat. They'll have to raise property taxes or sales tax or some other form of tax in order to make up the losses in TV in lieu of taxes. So, you know, we may be on the leading end of it, but it's definitely not something that I think is going to be unseen in the future.
What else? Thank you, Mr. Hodges. What else are you thinking that you'd like to cover in this presentation?
I'd really encourage. We've done a lot of videos. We've done, through our meetings. We've done lots of articles have been in the paper regarding a lot of the things we've done. I would just encourage folks. If you're watching this video, please take time to watch some of the other videos. You've posted several of our community meetings, I think, as well. Please take the time to understand, watch some of those videos, understand the full aspect of what we've done. And we've said this time and time again, and I know that you've had some concerns and some questions regarding the dollars we have in the bank and how we spend certain dollars and things like that. If folks want to know, we'll be glad to sit down with them and tell them. There's absolutely no problem with doing that. If we can't share the information or we say we're not going to answer that, that's when there's a problem. But we hope that we can answer every single question that's asked, and we try our best to do that. So I hope folks will understand that, as they ask the questions or whatever. We want to sit down and have that conversation. Let's talk about it. We may not agree at the end of the day, but at least let's have the conversation. Let us show you what we're looking at if you really feel that something's not right there.
Let's talk about, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is an important point, because I think there is a degree of misunderstanding here in looking at the budget document. You talk about a piggy bank, or right. I like to call it a reserve fund.
Right.
And so that people do not misunderstand that you're requesting basically a 1% tax increase, and there is funds that are held, whether you want to call it a piggy bank, reserve, rainy day, or whatever. Right. Tell me just in a few minutes what that's about.
Okay, we've roughly now got about $2 million set aside in that piggy bank or reserve fund. Essentially, folks may think that's a lot of money. Where's the problem at? That would be 1 year. Based on this sales tax, that's 1 year of paving and it's gone. We've held on incredibly tight to that money. We've been very strict about where that money's spent, because once it's gone, it's gone. There's nothing to replenish those dollars that's in that piggy bank right now.
That's right, because you're running a deficit.
Correct.
A deficit.
So as we continue, if we were to continue to run that deficit, obviously it would eat that. We've cut the deficit tremendously. Otherwise, that piggy bank or that fund would be gone. But that's why we have to cut the deficit, because if we don't, that fund's going to be gone, and then we will be, you get into the bouncing checks portion of things.
Right.
And that's not how, we do not want to declare bankruptcy. We don't want to go that far into the hole. We don't want to be that kind of situation. We want to put on the brakes before we get to the edge of the cliff.
An appropriate
analogy.
Analogy there. Putting on the brakes before we get to the edge of the cliff. And that's it.
Exactly.
That's it. You got to have money to operate.
Right.
People have to pay for the services.
Right.
I mean, this money is, you can't go out and pick the money tree.
Right.
You can't go out and expect money from heaven going to fall on us. It's not going to happen. The people have to pay for the service. If the people want to have the services, I think it's very commendable that you have put it to the people for a vote, because it is the folks' decision of this county to decide if they want to raise the tax to pay for the services that they're getting, expand industrial operations through encouraging, and a lot of, this is another area, I understand it, you understand it, but a lot of people may not realize competition for industry is stiff, man. You got people that are giving away property, giving tax breaks, and that's what it takes to get large corporations into the area. You may not like it, I don't agree with it, but hey, those are the ways that what we have to do. The state of Alabama, Mercedes, Honda, all that.
Right.
All
that's what's required now.
That's what's required to get the big business here, to give people jobs.
Right.
And we have to be able to, as a county in industrial development, to offer incentives, and this is what it is. And I made a note here, in that $2.16 million that is for the rainy day fund, the piggy bank, the reserve, industrial development is one of those areas that has been funded out of that.
Right.
The airport, which is another important area. What else is funded out of that?
Really, we've limited it again to just those types of items. If it's something, when a business comes, here's the problem, business comes, Google.
Yeah.
If there's dollars we have to spend extra for something like Google, that's where it's going to come from. With the way our tax system works, we're not going to see those dollars recover to do another Google or whatever else the case may be.
Except by the people that's employed there.
Well, we don't know. We don't see any benefit. The only benefits we see, we'll see a small amount of property tax from those people. You know, if they build a house or if they buy a house, you know, or property values go, we'll see a small increase in our property taxes. But we don't get sales tax, so all the money those folks spend around, we're not going to be getting that benefit. We abate all the industrial property taxes, so we get nothing from that industry. The in lieu of tax stands to be affected by Google because it's such a big power user. Again, it's not going to solve our problem. It'll bring us hopefully back up to maybe today's rates, and it'll continue to drop as Bellefonte continues its depreciation. So really, outside of that, the county, I mean, we don't get hardly anything financially for our operations from industrial development because of the way the tax system works. It's really, that is a testament to how broken the system is. So even if we spend that goes back to, if we spend that reserve fund on industrial development, we'll never see those dollars come back into it if we don't have a sales tax, because there's no other revenue source that provides, will provide dollars to it.
Anything else you'd like to add to this?
No, I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll continue to put the information out there until August 18th. So I hope that
August 18th today.
Right. That's the day to again, as you said, the citizens will make a decision. We truly feel it's a decision as to whether we go forward or backwards as a county. And when I say county, I mean everybody, because we're all in this boat together.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The explanation's important.
All right. Thank you.